Welcome to step 14, classify your expenses. There's nothing like talking about expenses in the morning, right? Sipping that cup of morning joe, looking over a spreadsheet of how you've spent your money, balancing that checkbook. Nothing like it, right? No? Really? Categorizing your expenses and managing a budget doesn't get you up in the morning? I'm frankly shocked. All right. Joking aside, when it comes to budgeting, when it comes to expenses, when it comes to taking a hard look at what you're spending your money on, well, some people would rather have teeth pulled or go through just about anything else rather than talk about their finances and what they spend their money on. And look, I'm right there with you. This is something that I frankly don't see a lot of the point of. In my mind, tracking spending manually, looking at every single thing you spend money on, whipping yourself if you fall out of line, well, I just think that's pointless. All right, maybe not pointless, but I don't see the point of it for most people. Look, if you're not doing it now, no amount of me with my radio voice and my cool, slick motivational quotes is going to tell you anything more than you already know. You know that you're probably spending more than you should, or there's areas where you can make improvements. It's good to admit that to yourself. But I think tracking spending manually is a hassle, and it's going to demotivate you from finding where your real opportunities for improvement are. Look, I can never keep up, and I talk about finances just about every day. If I can't do it, I don't expect you to. Monthly budgets are often useless because we underestimate our monthly expenses. We simply can't predict the future and how things are actually going to shake out. However, that's not what I'm talking about in this step. What I am talking about is understanding the things you have to pay for every month, such as housing, transportation, utilities, food, and debt payments. These are unavoidable expenses. That is what we need to understand right now before we do anything else. So before we get going any further, for the ready set plan of this step, we need to classify our expenses. So get out your notepad, look through your statements, take some time and look at all the costs and identify different expense categories. This might also be a great opportunity to set up something like Mint, which automatically categorizes all of your expenses so you can more easily digest the information, see at a high level where your money is going. Group the expense categories together however it makes sense for you. Here's a couple ideas. House, such as rent or mortgage, house maintenance, household goods, furniture, things like that. Utilities, such as the electric bill, the water bill, the gas, the cable, the TV, your bill for your cell phone or your internet, how much you spend on groceries every month on average, how much you spend at bars and restaurants on average, how much you spend on things like hobbies, sports, books, games, movies, things like that, how much you spend on medical expenses, how much you spend on things like clothes. Find other areas that you have general expenses, how much you might spend on things like pets or kids, how much you spend on your car, such as gas, maintenance, insurance, and toll payments, how much you might be spending on vacations and travel, how much you're spending on luxuries if you can, how much you're spending on things like taxes, insurance, how much you're putting away for savings and investments, how much you're giving to charity, no shame if you're not, and how much you're spending on things like presents and gifts. And again, the point here is not to have you identify, oh, I'm spending $100 a month on coffee. If I just cut that out, wow, I would be saving $100. No. I understand why people spend money like that. If it brings you happiness, maybe you could cut down on it or find ways to make it cheaper. But honestly, if that 7 a.m. Frappuccino is all that stands between you and oblivion on a Monday morning, I get it. As we work through this section of the course, here are 3 things that I want to stress. First off, that budgets normally are overrated. They create stress and we don't stick to them. Again, if that is what works for you, you're probably already doing it, and good for you if you can track every single dollar, and that's what helps you to stay ahead at the end of the month. But for most people, it's not an effective way to track their money, to be manually tracking every single dollar. Instead, and this is the second thing, all you need is a spending allowance. Instead of tracking dozens of categories of spending, knowing how much you can spend per month, your spending allowance, after you've covered the big expenses and the savings and the things you have to pay for, well, just having an idea of what that discretionary income, that spending allowance is going to be so much more effective for you in creating and maintaining a mindset around money management. You know, some people have to track every dollar. Some people have to cut up the credit cards. Some people have to make sure that they stick to a very regimented plan. But for the vast majority of people, I don't think that is the right call. Instead, I think it's much more effective to look at this as a two-stage problem. You need to reduce expenses and you need to increase income. Absolutely, you could look at where you're spending money every month, the things that you can't get away from, like rent or groceries, and you could move somewhere cheaper. You could find ways to cut down on your grocery expenses. We'll definitely get into that. But I think the most important thing that I can convey, and this is the third thing, is that you need a system that works for you and that you can stick to. Once you have a better idea of what your fixed, your variable, and your discretionary expenses are, which we'll cover in the next 3 steps and will derive from your Ready Set plan of this step, well, I just think that's a much better way for you to feel on top of your expenses, your money outflow, and really get you to recognize that there's ways you can balance your checkbook, your expenses, so that you don't have to defer happiness, but you also are being responsible as well. So let's move into the next step.